Hi, friends. I got kicked out of my room here at school. They're waxing the floors, so apologies if the sound isn't as good. Chapter 10, the Byzantine Empire. We have a thought question right away. We saw in the last video that Rome collapsed, and in this part of Europe, they kind of refer to it as like the Dark Ages. But we should always ask, like for whom are these Dark Ages? Like, where is it dark? Because in 800, in other parts of the world, different people were thriving. Like the Muslim world and the Tang dynasty in China reached their apexes and really did some incredible things. So the Dark Ages, it wasn't dark everywhere in the world, but in Europe, they got into the Dark Ages. The Byzantine Empire is kind of what I refer to as like Rome Part 2, but a little bit different. It had many characteristics of the Romans. We saw the move of the capital from Rome to Constantinople. The text starts off with kind of this cool story. In 871, I think, there was a Russian ruler who had invaded Constantinople, and his ships were sailing into the harbor. They were attacking the Byzantines, and then the Greeks unleashed this like Greek fire on them, where they set their ships ablaze, and then when they were pouring water on the fire just got even bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and they couldn't believe it. They're like, "What is this stuff?" They didn't know how to distinguish it. The Byzantines had this kind of like alchemy, if you will, if that's the right word, of this ingredient of Greek fire. And it involved petroleum. They didn't write it down because it was so secret. You could consider it like the coolest weapon of the time. So that's kind of an exciting way to start the chapter. I actually think that might be the inspiration for this episode of Game of Thrones, where something called wildfire is used. I'm not entirely sure on that though. But this is what the video will cover. Constantinople. We saw in 476, Rome officially collapsed. But before that, Constantine had moved, or Diocletian had split the empire, and there was this new capital at Constantinople named for the Roman Emperor Constantine. And while Rome collapsed, the Western Empire, the Eastern Empire was thriving then too. Right away, geography plays just a crucial role in history. If you look at where Constantinople is, it's on a narrow stretch of water called the Bosporus. And if I am in a ship, I like to draw boats, what I can do is if I'm in the Black Sea, I can go through the Bosporus into the Sea of Marmara, into the Aegean Sea, and down into the Mediterranean Sea then too. And even if I go far enough, I can go all the way into the Atlantic Ocean then too. So think about how important the trade revenues could be here. If you have to tax ships that are going from the Black Sea down into the Aegean, that is going to make the Byzantines incredibly wealthy then too. So geography, it's like just situated at this perfect spot between the West, between Europe, and the East in Asia then. Still today, Asia Minor, this area, Anatolia or Turkey, is kind of considered this crossroads between Europe and between Asia then too. So Constantinople is at a great spot, and also it's at a very, very defensible position too. There were two walls that protected the city to the west, and then the Bosporus, the water, to the east. So it was a very defensible location then too. Notable developments of the Byzantine Empire. It's going to be a blend of Greek, Christian, and Roman influences too. We saw that Constantinople was really a Roman city, but it used to be a Greek city, and now it's going to be a Christian city then too, because Constantine in 313 declared himself a Christian, and Christianity was the official religion of the Byzantine Empire. So within the Byzantine Empire, Christians are no longer being persecuted like they were prior to Constantine. The most remarkable Byzantine ruler is a guy named Justinian. And what he is going to do is he's going to codify a set of laws that will be administered throughout the entire empire. So it's like if you were here in Asia Minor, maybe down here in Peloponnesus, or even in the southern part of Italy, which was all part of the Byzantine Empire, the law is the same here as it is here, as it is here. We had this idea back of the Roman praetors, the judges. The judges would make decisions that were all based on precedent. And he really codified a set of laws that were administered throughout the entire empire. Later, when they're rediscovered during the Renaissance, Justinian's code formed the basis for many European countries then today, too. I think the coolest thing about the Byzantine is the Hagia Sophia. which is this church that is created, located here in Constantinople, now Istanbul, a place that I really, really want to go to. It has a very, very unique history. It was built using, again, Greek architecture. It's this colossal structure, which I'll talk about in just a second. It has a very interesting path. Built again here at this crossroads. It was originally built as a Catholic church, converted into an Eastern Orthodox church. More about that in just a second. Converted into a mosque when it fell to the Turks in 1547, I think. I have to check my date on that one. It was transformed into a museum at one point, too. This remarkable building that has been a church, a mosque. But now, even today in 2022, the current president of Turkey, Erdogan, has reverted it back to a mosque, I think. I'm not entirely sure. Lots of different people have different interpretations of what this building should be. So who really defines what the Hagia Sophia is? This is still a question going on today then, too. The Hagia Sophia was damaged in Constantinople. The Byzantine Empire nearly fell when a series of revolts known as the Nika revolts threatened the stability of the empire. But Justinian and his wife, whose name was Theodora, she was born, I think, a peasant. I think Justinian was too. She took matters into her own hands when she met with the rioters during the Nika revolts, said she wanted to discuss terms with them, had them sent into one of these buildings and had everybody executed too. Or she convinced her husband to stay. So she really took pretty brutal measures to ensure that the Nika revolts were put down and that the Byzantine Empire was continuing to thrive. Another really major event in religion occurred in the Byzantine Empire, and it involved a religious split. So I asked my students, like, we have different religions have like different denominations, right? So there might be Catholics, Lutherans, Mennonites, Protestants, evangelical, but all these are like Christian institutions, or they adhere to Christian principles. So how did we get all these different groups? Lots of times we associate it with the Protestant Reformation and Martin Luther in 1517, but actually the first time the church split into two groups occurred during something known as the Schism, which more or less you had two different churches. The Catholic Church, which meant universal, which was the first church, but then the Eastern Orthodox Church is still going to be a Christian church, but it's going to separate. And this occurred for a couple of reasons. The Catholic Church at first said that the authority of the Pope is most important, but the Eastern Orthodox Church says, no, we don't really need to accept the authority of the Pope. We're going to reject his messages. The Catholic Church also, at this point, said that Mass should only be read in Latin, but the Eastern Orthodox Church said, well, why can't it be read in Greek, which is what most of the people in this part of the Byzantine Empire spoke. And the Catholic Church has used idols and religious icons in worship, but the Eastern Orthodox Church said, no, we're not going to use idols. We don't think it's correct. They stamped out and destroyed many Christian idols, saying they should not be used in the worship, but that was eventually changed in the 9th century. So we had the schism. This occurred in 1054 when you had two different churches. Wow, that is so bad. I'm sorry, I forgot to put it on here. That's 1054. A schism, a split between two strongly opposed sections or parties, the Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church. Or another vocab word. I did put it in here. I'll just ignore this. Oh, dear. 1054 is when this happened. I'm going to use a triangle to indicate kind of important years. And another vocab word, if you want to, is iconoclasm. In the East, these idols were deliberately destroyed, and they were attacked for a while. So two different churches. So we can use a Taylor Swift. We are never getting back together. Oh, no. Sorry, guys. Okay, one more slide. Oh, yeah. The Hagia Sophia. Just incredible. It's built on a fault line and has withstood earthquakes. The Statue of Liberty could go inside of this dome and it still wouldn't touch the top. You have Arabic inscriptions, Christian inscriptions, because again, this building has been it all. It's really, I think, cool. And the last one too, Justinian died in 565, and our text notes that the Byzantine Empire had kind of a second revival under Basil II. His rule started 411 years after Justinian died, which kind of again speaks to how long this history was. There was, however, the fall of the Byzantine Empire in, again, 1453. There was war amongst various groups, especially later on, groups that will grow up in the Muslim faith. There was conflict on the borders. It's actually a Byzantine ruler who called on Urban II to call on the crusade, which we will study later on this year. It was actually attacked by Christians in 1204 during the Fourth Crusade, when Christian kingdoms and Muslim kingdoms were at war. One crusade actually went astray and sacked the city because of its great wealth. It was eventually captured by Mehmed II in 1453, the fall of Constantinople, and it eventually changed its name to Istanbul, which it is now currently today in Turkey, again on the Bosporus. So I will end with, of course, the Looney Tunes. Istanbul was Constantinople. If you don't know this song, go check it out. All right, I'm done.